On a windless Sunday morning in late March, squad cars crowded a cul-de-sac in Maple Glen, a tidy suburb an hour outside Houston, where lawns were striped by mowers and doorbells spoke in chimes. Neighbors peeked between blinds as EMTs rolled a stretcher down the front walk of the Carter-Reyes home. The sheet reached only to the chin. The face beneath it belonged to 21-year-old Liam Carter, a familiar silhouette from pickup basketball, coffee runs, and polite waves from the driver's seat of a silver Civic. On the porch, 19-year-old Noah Reyes sat with his hands cuffed at the small of his back, knuckles raw, lips split. He stared at his shoes the way people stare at ledges. Inside, detectives moved through a living room that smelled faintly of detergent and last night's cologne. A shattered photo frame on the console table displayed two families blended into one. Tom Carter, with his son, Liam. Elena Reyes, with her son, Noah. Two weddings worth of smiles condensed into a single mantelpiece. The officers worked quietly, marking a pattern of blood drops across the hall, the scuffing on the bottom stair, the heavy bookend on the floor where it didn't belong. Someone had called 911 at 11:42 p.m. With a voice that couldn't decide whether it had witnessed an accident or a life finally breaking in half. The story of how it came to that call began 2 years earlier, when Tom and Elena met at a charity banquet and decided, at 40-something, to build a second life. They married fast, sold the redundancies, one sofa, one grill, 2 sets of holiday plates, and bought the house on Cotton-Briar Lane, saying phrases like, "Fresh start," and "We're all adults here." Liam, then 19, commuted to a nearby university and worked part-time at an outdoor store. He was measured, careful, the product of a father who prized reliability above all else. Noah had just turned 18, fresh out of high school, with a sketchbook in his backpack and a restless energy that made teachers tap desks and say, "Focus." They weren't boys when they met under one roof, and they weren't quite men either. They were two strangers linked by a ceremony neither of them planned. The first months were polite choreography, shared sink space, borrowed chargers, rides offered and declined. Then came the small, unguarded moments that make a home. Wet sneakers by the back door, late-night takeout eaten at the counter, jokes traded over trash cans on Mondays. Noah discovered Liam's playlists. Liam admired the way Noah tuned silence out with a pencil and made it come back as a face. The shift was not a single event, so much as a series of tiny permissions. One night in September, when thunder walked the roof and the lights flickered, the neighborhood went dark. Tom and Elna were at a fundraiser downtown. Liam and Noah lit candles in the family room and let the storm carry their conversation where it wanted. They talked about first apartments and first mistakes, about the ache of pretending you're fine when your life has been packed into boxes twice in as many years. Liam admitted he hadn't dated anyone seriously in college. Noah admitted he'd never told Elena that the word he was wrestling with since sophomore year didn't match the person she imagined her son would bring home. Silence settled like a decision. Noah reached for the matches. Liam reached too. Skin met skin and stayed there a beat longer than it had to. Neither of them pulled away. When Noah finally did, it was to lift his eyes to meet Liam's without flinching. It wasn't a question, not really. It was a door standing open in a house where doors were usually left ajar. They kissed in the kind of quiet that feels like an oath. In the morning, sunlight came in the back windows and found them sitting 2 feet apart on the sectional, phones in their palms like contraband. The house snapped back to normal, and with it came rules. Liam made them, careful and precise. Nothing in common spaces. Nothing when anyone else was home. Nothing that left a trace. No photos, no notes, no gifts. Noah agreed, because agreeing meant more minutes, and minutes were a currency he was suddenly rich in. They told themselves they were careful. They told themselves it was temporary. A pressure valve, while they figured themselves out on the other side of two last names that had recently been stapled together. Secrecy, it turned out, was a performance they learned quickly. They traded laughter for glances in front of their parents. They moved like choreographers through the house, calculating angles and shadows. They became experts at timing. 10 minutes after the garage door lifted in the morning, 2 minutes before the dryer buzzed at night. There was a thrill to the precision, and they mistook its sharpness for clarity. What they didn't see was how secrecy changes the shape of a thing. It amplifies it. It compresses it until longing becomes the only air in the room. By winter, Liam began to shift. He stopped answering texts right away. He started staying late at work, volunteering for inventory nights that didn't need volunteers. He bought a gym membership 2 towns over and went there to run until his legs shook because the pounding felt like work his brain could understand. He loved Noah. He had finally let himself say it. But each time he looked in the hallway mirror, he saw his father's jawline and heard the version of the word, family, that had built a life around him. He couldn't square the two. Noah didn't have Liam's compartments. What they had eclipsed everything else. He started showing up at Liam's shifts with iced coffee and a grin. He snapped an artful photo of Liam leaning against a kayak and saved it, against the rules, under a file name no one would guess. He created a shared note in his phone and filled it with plans disguised as jokes, addresses of studio apartments, second-hand furniture links, places he could imagine them eating breakfast on plastic chairs and hoodies the color of sleep. For a while, the rules kept the edges smooth. Then they didn't. One late night that Elena assumed was a study session, Noah followed Liam out to the garage as he was heading to the gym. "Come with me," he said. Liam shook his head and told a lie that was also true. "I need space." Noah laughed it off, the way people laugh when they're scared. He waited in the kitchen until the house settled and wrote Liam's initials in the thin fog on the back door window. By dawn, they were gone, which felt like proof the rules still worked. If you'd asked the neighbors then, they would have said this was a family that waved at snowplows and took turns with the ladder at Christmas. They wouldn't have said there was a fault line under the hallway. Fault lines look like floors until the day they don't. The day the fault line moved, it did so quietly. Elena knocked on Liam's door to ask about a grocery list and caught a sliver of a scene reflected in his laptop screen. 2 figures shoulder to shoulder on a bed, a smile that didn't belong to a brother. She closed the door softly and carried the question into her own room like a hot plate. She didn't say anything over dinner. She waited and watched and found herself learning the same choreography her sons had learned. Who crossed paths, where, who touched which chair, back when. Maps only help if you believe them. Elena believed hers just enough to start checking receipts for patterns and phones for changes in brightness at night. By February, every breath in the house felt measured. Liam woke to a text from Noah that read, "I can't breathe like this." Liam typed and erased replies until the phone went dark in his hand. He loved Noah. He couldn't see a way for that love to live in daylight without burning everything else he knew. He decided to tell him they needed to stop. He decided he would be kind and final. He decided, the way people do when they put off reckoning, that choosing the right words could change physics. The next night, the storm didn't come from the sky. It came from the sound of a door closing on the far end of a hall and footsteps that didn't slow down until they reached the room where the rules began. That was where the secret stopped being a secret and started being a story. And stories don't let you skip to the end just because you can see it. The conversation Liam had practiced dissolved on contact with Noah's face. He told himself to be gentle. He told himself to be clear. Noah heard only one thing, that the person he had finally trusted with the truest version of himself was now asking him to fold it back up like a sweater and put it on a shelf. He smiled the way hurt people sometimes smile, with all their teeth. "We're not doing this," he said, and Liam, who had always preferred doors to walls, stepped into a smaller room and tried again. They didn't shout. That was the problem. The quiet made every word sound like a hinge creaking. Liam said he needed a boundary. Noah said boundaries were what other people drew around them, not what they drew around each other. Liam said he didn't want to live in lies. Noah said the truth couldn't be a lie. Liam used the phrase time apart. Noah said a month and stared at him like someone measuring distance with their eyes. In the days that followed, Noah tested every lock he could find. He texted good morning before sunrise and good night after midnight, so there was no space that didn't have his name in it. When Liam muted the thread, Noah sent a photo of the couch where they'd fallen asleep that first storm night. Just the armrest and the candle wax stain, the kind of evidence that says, this happened whether you like it or not. When Liam didn't reply, Noah waited in the parking lot of the outdoor store and walked him to his car without speaking. He stood too close. He breathed the way you do when you've run too fast to catch up. Jealousy entered the story like a stranger with the wrong address. A classmate from Liam's marketing course posted a photo from a group project. 4 students shoulder to shoulder in a library booth, framed by fluorescent light. Noah saw it before Liam did. He zoomed until the pixels fell apart and still managed to convince himself he could read Liam's shoulder, leaning toward the girl on his left. He drove to campus and sat in his car for an hour watching doorways until Liam appeared with a stack of printouts and a smile he didn't share with anyone. Noah followed him to the lot and slid in beside him as he unlocked the Civic. "You didn't answer," he said. Liam said, "I was in class," a sentence that sounded like a different kind of door closing. The thread of secrecy that had been a thrill now cut skin. Elena's suspicion hardened into action. She installed a new doorbell camera after a package disappeared on the street. She told herself that was the reason. 2 days later, it caught Noah letting himself in with the keypad, while Tom and Elena were at work, and Liam was supposed to be at the gym. He left 47 minutes later, carrying nothing. Elena watched the clip at the kitchen table with the sound off, one hand over her mouth. She didn't confront anyone. She began, instead, the slow collection of receipts mothers undertake when they still hope the story might end somewhere other than where it's going. Liam tried to de-escalate by shrinking. He cut his shifts, skipped group hangouts, stopped eating at the counter because stools put him in the open. He told Noah to meet him in neutral spaces, parking lots, the secluded corner of a park, with the logic of someone who believes geography can make behavior different. Noah nodded and then showed up where he wanted anyway, certain that love exempted him from rules love had created. On a raw Thursday night in February, Liam asked to meet at the park. He wore a sweatshirt with the hood up and stood under a light that made everyone look like a stranger. He said the words he had been avoiding in the simplest order he could. "We need to stop. We're hurting. It isn't working." Noah's hands opened and closed. He said, "You don't mean that." Liam didn't touch him when he said, "I do." Noah laughed, a soft, awful sound. "You can't ask me to go back to before," he said. Liam said nothing because the truth was that he was asking exactly that, and knowing it didn't make it less necessary. Noah left without turning his head. 10 minutes later, he texted, "If you won't tell them, I will." The words didn't read like a threat so much as a plan snapped from a branch. The house began to feel like a courtroom with no judge. Tom noticed Liam's jump when his phone buzzed. He noticed Elena's pauses before she spoke. He noticed the way Noah moved through rooms like he was listening for something. One evening, he pulled phone records under the pretense of checking their data plan. The log bloomed with late-night calls. He stared at the bill with a steady anger that pretended to be fiscal responsibility and felt like something else entirely. He asked Liam if everything was okay. Liam said yes in the way people say no. Noah pressed harder. He printed screenshots. The candle wax stain, the blurred corner of a selfie where Liam's hand rested on Noah's shoulder, the park light pooling at their feet like a confession leaking out of the ground. He slid a manila envelope under Liam's door with a note. "If we're done, I'm not hiding what you are." Liam burned the note over the kitchen sink and told himself he was removing kindling. The smell climbed into the vent and made the whole house smell like something had been cooked too long. The night the story changed shape, it started with the simplest family ritual: dinner at the table with phones face down. Elena asked about school. Tom asked about work. Liam said little. Noah said less. When the meal was over, Elena said she needed help with the trash bins and asked Liam to come with her to the side yard. It was cold. Her breath made small ghosts. "I need you to tell me what I already know," she said. "There are rooms inside people where the floor gives way without warning." Liam stepped into one. He didn't confess, not exactly. He said he had made mistakes, which is the word people use when the body remembers what the brain wants to deny. He said he and Noah needed space. Elena's eyes filled with a complicated grief that had no single name. She nodded. "Your father will need to hear it from you," she said, and they both turned back toward the warm square of the kitchen window, where Noah watched them with his hands pressed flat to the glass. That night in the living room, truth entered like a draft. Tom stood with his arms folded and waited with the patience of a man who had misread a map and was only now admitting it. Liam told the truth in truncated sentences. Noah listened from the far end of the couch like a defendant who refuses to plead. Tom's face worked through disbelief into something uglier. "Under my roof," he said, a phrase that belongs to tired TV fathers until it belongs to you. Elena said, "They're adults," and the room understood that it was both true and insufficient. Boundaries were declared like emergency ordinances. Noah would stay with his aunt for a while. Liam would move into campus housing at mid-semester. There would be no contact. It sounded orderly, like policy instead of heartbreak. Noah agreed out loud and disagreed with his feet. He took his duffel upstairs and emptied it back into his dresser. When Liam knocked on his door to say, "Please," Noah stared at him long enough to let pleading turn to anger. A day later, boxes appeared by Liam's bedroom door, the kind you buy when you think you're leaving on purpose. Noah watched from the hall and said nothing. He texted that night, "You're not walking away from me." Liam didn't answer. He put his phone on airplane mode and slept with a light on like a child. Secrets end two ways, slowly like a tire with a nail in it, or all at once with a sound that makes neighbors look up. This one chose both. For 3 days, the house held its breath. Liam moved from room to room like he was being filmed, conscious of angles, careful not to be alone in hallways. Tom left before dawn for a job site and returned after sunset, talking louder than the room required. Elena hovered at the edges of chores, setting a mug down a little too carefully, tying the trash bag as if sudden movements might set off something delicate. Noah's quiet was the loudest part. He went to class. He came home. He didn't text. He ate standing at the counter and washed his plate. He looked like someone who had accepted a verdict and was serving it with good behavior. Relief tempted Liam the way a cold drink tempts after a long run. Too easy, too soon. He mistook stillness for change. On Thursday afternoon, while Liam stood at the kitchen island filling out a housing form he had been putting off, a notification broke through. "AirTag detected near you." He frowned, checked his backpack, found nothing. The alert vanished. He told himself it was a glitch and put his head down over the form again. From the dining room window, a neighbor watering succulents watched Noah's car creep by, pause, and continue. She shook her head, filed the sight away the way people do when they feel powerless to do anything but remember. That evening, Elena announced she was going to her sister's to drop off a casserole and would be back by 10. Tom said he needed to swing by the yard to check a delivery. The front door closed twice in quick succession. It was the first time in days the house belonged only to the boys. Liam stared at the door after it latched and felt, not freedom, but a tilt. Noah appeared in the archway to the kitchen, hands in his hoodie pocket, expression composed the way a stage set is composed. Straight lines, no dust, darkness behind. "We need to talk," he said, and the phrase felt both ordinary and like a hazard label. Liam didn't run. He didn't invite him to sit. He kept the island between them as if quartz could conduct safety. "There's nothing left to say," he replied. We agreed. Noah's laugh came out wrong. "You agreed," he said. He moved closer. "You promised me a future, and now you're pretending you didn't." "I promised I loved you," Liam said, and the sentence landed like a dropped glass. "That's true. It's also true that I can't live like this." The argument unfolded with the precision of two people who know exactly where the other person's soft points are. Noah said Liam would date girls to make Tom proud. Liam said Noah wanted love to be a performance of defiance. Noah said he'd watched Liam pick the gym over him, class over him, anything over him. Liam said he was allowed to choose himself, and that saying no wasn't betrayal. The sentences stacked, brittle and exact. When Liam reached for his phone, Noah stepped forward and covered it with his palm. "Don't," he said. Liam kept his hand steady on the counter. "Move," he said, voice low. Noah didn't. He brushed the phone off the counter instead. A quick snap of the wrist. It hit the tile and skated, clattering to a stop under the breakfast nook bench. Silence. Then, motion. Liam moved to retrieve it. Noah moved to stop him, and their shoulders hit with the force of runners taking a curve too tight. The bench jerked. A heavy bookend that Elena had used as a doorstop toppled from the sill, bounced once, and landed on the floor with a dull, heavy sound. The first shove was not hateful, it was clumsy. The second was not. Noah drove Liam backward toward the stairs with a forearm across his chest, eyes widened by a brand of panic that looks, from the outside, like rage. At the bottom step, Liam's heel slid on the rounded edge, and his balance broke. He grabbed at Noah's hoodie to steady himself and took Noah with him. They went down together in a tangle of limbs, the kind of fall that leaves bruises you find 2 days later and can't place. They thudded to a stop on the landing. For a moment, both lay still, gulping air. When they rose, the argument turned a corner words can't usually pull it back from. Noah's hand shot out and gripped Liam's jaw, thumb pressing into one cheek, fingers into the other. An awful parody of a lover's hold. "Say you're mine," he hissed, a command wrapped around a plea. Liam pried at Noah's wrist, nails whitening. "Let go." Liam drove his shoulder into Noah to break the grip. Noah stumbled into the console table. The framed family photo rattled, tipped, and crashed to the floor, glass spreading in a sparkle across the runner. Noah looked down at the picture of 4 people arranged in 2 neat rows, and then up at Liam with an expression that said, "Some stories can't be put back under glass." He turned and ran for the kitchen. Liam followed, breath sawing, more afraid of distance than proximity now. In the kitchen, Noah's hand went not to the phone on the floor, but to the knife block by the stove. He didn't take the chef's knife. He took the smaller utility knife, the one that looks like an extension of a hand. "Stop," Liam said, palms up. "Please." Noah shook his head, shoulders heaving. If I can't have you, no one gets to pretend you're something else. They faced each other across an island that had hosted 100 bowls of cereal. Liam took a step, then another, calculating angles that didn't exist. Noah mirrored him. The world shrank to a triangle of tile and breath. What happened next took less time than it takes to say it out loud. Noah moved first. Liam moved faster, not toward Noah, but around the island, aiming for the garage door, the place where oxygen lives. Noah lunged. His foot clipped the corner of the rug, and his momentum carried him forward. The knife met Liam's shoulder and glanced, cutting through fabric and skin. Liam cried out and turned. They collided. The blade drove in again, this time with the awful force of two bodies trying to occupy 1 square foot. Liam sagged. Noah's face changed, not to victory but to horror. Blood found the lowest point on the tile and moved toward it, slow and determined. Liam slid down the cabinet in a sitting fall, left hand pressed to his side, right hand scrabbling for anything that looked like time. Noah stepped back as if distance could undo physics. The world decided it had heard enough and cut the sound out of the room. From across the street, a Ring camera captured only motion, 2 shadows warping across a kitchen wall, then stillness. At 11:42 p.m., a call went through to 911 from a number registered to Elena. The voice on the line shook so hard the dispatcher asked her to repeat the address twice. "He's bleeding," Noah said. "He fell, please." The pronouns didn't agree with the scene. They rarely do when panic does the talking. Sirens approach like decisions. Slow, then too fast. Red and blue lit the kitchen and made the blood look like a kind of paint. Paramedics worked where dinner plates had been stacked 6 hours earlier, cutting shirt fabric, pushing gauze, counting compressions in a rhythm older than language. Elena walked in behind them and made a sound that doesn't have a word. Tom came a minute later and stopped in the doorway, like a man who has just realized all the doors in his house are mirrors. They called time at 11:58. Homicide made a perimeter out of tape and quiet. The first detective took in the kitchen like a moving grid. Knife block, 1 missing, a scatter of glass down the hall, a bookend, poorly placed for any reason other than what had just happened. He clocked the wound location, the angle, the absence of defensive cuts on Liam's hands, the single clean smear where someone had reached for the counter and found blood instead. He asked who had been home. Elena said no one. Tom said he had just walked in. Noah said too many sentences that started with, "I was just." On the porch, an officer read Noah his rights, while a second bagged his hoodie. Inside the pocket, they found an AirTag and asked why. "To keep track of my keys," Noah said, and the officer, who had 2 sons the same age and knew the weight of tracking as a verb, wrote it down without agreeing. The house became a translation project. Digital forensics pulled a story off phones with the indifference of weather. Hundreds of messages, thousands of minutes, emojis that look like jokes until you stack them end to end and see a need shaped like a person. Liam's last texts were practical. The housing form, a class group chat, a sentence to Noah at 10:04 that read, "Please don't come by tonight." A neighborhood camera caught Noah's car slow, then return just before 11. The doorbell cam recorded his code entry and the timing of the second entry at 11:19 when, for reasons he could not explain, he stepped outside, stood in the dark for 40 seconds, then went back in like someone walking through an invisible wall. The medical examiner wrote what instruments of record always write when life is reduced to paragraphs. 1 sharp force injury to the left, lateral thorax. Depth and trajectory, consistent with a single person holding the blade. Secondary superficial cut to left shoulder. blood loss as primary cause of death. Under lividity and rigor, the ME typed the numbers the clock insisted on and closed the file with a stamp. Charges came Monday morning: second-degree murder. The state didn't need to prove planning, only the sequence that any jury could see: threat, escalation, blade. Noah's public defender tried to pull the story toward a lesser charge: heat of passion, accident, self-defense gone wrong. But the evidence built its own spine. Location pings, the AirTag alert on Liam's phone, the ring angles, the 911 call with its scrambled pronouns, Elena's testimony that she had told both boys there would be no contact that night, and Noah's coded entry anyway. Tom's anger made him an unreliable witness. He admitted he'd threatened to kick them both out, then said he didn't mean it. The DA didn't need him. The House had already spoken. The trial in August drew cameras to a courthouse that usually handled HOA disputes and traffic tickets. Reporters stood under ficus trees and said the words "blended family" like they were explaining a recipe that had gone wrong in the oven. Inside, the prosecution walked the jury down the hall from the living room to the kitchen using enlarged stills taped to foam board. The blood drops became arrows. The glass became punctuation. The knife became a period. The defense did what it could. They showed the text where Liam had written, "I love you," and argued that love, even bad love, is a mitigating context. They put a classmate of Liam's on the stand, who said she had seen him earlier that week, looking tired and jumpy, and thought he might be the kind of person who could start a fight without meaning to. It was thin as curtains. Noah took the stand against advice, because obsession doesn't listen when the law speaks. He cried in an unpretty way and told the jury he had only wanted to talk, that the knife was meant to scare, not to touch. He said he moved first because he was afraid Liam would walk out and never turn back. He said everything he should have said a month earlier in a park under a light. Some jurors looked at their hands. Deliberations took 6 hours, which is either very long or very short, depending on whether you have a mother in the front row. They returned guilty. The sentence, 25 years, sounded both arbitrary and like math when the judge read it. Elena folded as if her body finally received what her mind had already seen. Tom stared at the wood grain of the rail as if numbers might appear there, some equation that could balance what had happened. After the verdict, the house on Cottonbriar Lane didn't sell right away. The front room held boxes for months. Then a for sale sign appeared with a hopeful blue swoop across the top. The neighbor with the succulents moved her planters closer together and told a new couple at the HOA barbecue that the people before were nice, quiet, kept to themselves. She did not say anything about bookends or AirTags or the exact angle at which a young man's shoulders can slump when a story ends. In a prison 2 hours away, Noah marked days by jobs: kitchen, laundry, shelf inventory. Work so small, it kept his hands from knowing what they had done. He wrote letters to Elena, none to Tom. He did not write to Liam because there are addresses you can't send to. In his second year inside, he asked a counselor if grief is allowed to belong to a person who caused it. The counselor said yes, because the answer is yes, or the job can't exist. The official story ends with a docket number and a transcript. The true crime version ends with a wide shot of a quiet street and the knowledge that secrets warp under pressure and love is not proof against physics. The private story, the one that belongs to 4 people and a kitchen floor, never ends. It repeats itself in small ways, in the pause before a door code, in the note someone doesn't write, in the rule 2 people make thinking rules can save them. If anyone asks what happened in the house with the pretty ivy in March, the simplest answer is this: 2 adults who called themselves brothers fell in love where love wasn't allowed to live. One mistook possession for devotion. A knife made the mistake permanent. The longer answer lives in the spaces between all those sentences, in the quiet that comes after the sirens leave, and a mother puts a plate down and stares at the tile until the pattern stops moving.